big picture, what are we looking at?
Well, I think you are seeing, for one thing, the beginning of the end of Russia's war in Ukraine. The Wagner forces, which have been the most potent force in Ukraine, are now in Russia fighting against Russia. And even though Prigozhin says that he's going to keep up the war, I think the reality is his forces are going to be fighting Russian forces inside Russia. And any Russian forces remaining in Ukraine are not going to want to die in the trenches there, knowing it's a losing cause. So I think this is beginning to unravel there. In Russia, I think that this is really going to be a struggle of the state versus Prigozhin. I have to think the state is still going to pull it out, but I think it's the end for Putin.
What should be, what will be, two different questions, the NATO response?
I think NATO should stay and watch and see how this plays out. Keep supporting Ukraine. We ought to help the Ukrainians with some types of equipment we have still not given them yet, like long-range artillery and cluster munitions and aircraft, because now is the time for the Ukrainians to really press forward as the Russians are going to pull back. And then NATO really needs to make clear that it is going to bring Ukraine in as a member for real this time, not like we said in 2008. It has to be real because we have to stabilize these borders again so that we don't have more wars in Europe in the future.
Is your response the same relative to the Biden administration, same posture that you've just advocated for NATO? What should the president say today?
I think he should say that we stand by Ukraine's sovereignty and independence. Russia's war in Ukraine was a mistake. It is time for Russian forces to stop the war and pull out, and we look forward to rebuilding peace and security in Europe.
To use the old term of Kremlinology, reading the tea leaves and so forth, one wonders what will be the response from the Russian people to all of this, assuming they have full knowledge of the events.
Yeah, well, I think that is a great assumption. Do they really have full knowledge of the events or not? A lot goes around in Russia on Telegram social media channels, but it's not always accurate. So I'm not sure that they really do know. But I do believe that everyone in Russia knew that Putin's language about a special military operation and that everything was going swimmingly, they knew that was a lie. They knew it was going badly for so many reasons. The attacks we saw in Belgorod a couple weeks ago, the need to get convicts into the military to go fight on the front line, the mass conscription, the sanctions that we've seen. So everybody knew that this is not working. The only thing we didn't know is how it's going to change, how it's going to end. And I think Prigozhin is now the one who has popped the bubble.
Mr. Ambassador, you've been paying close attention to Vladimir Putin for a long time. When you look at the video and when you assess his actions, what is it that you see today?
I see a little bit of disbelief and indecisiveness. I think that he doesn't quite know what to do because he's never seen this kind of situation before. And it seems like Prigozhin has the initiative. Everyone around him is all suddenly quiet or maybe leaving town. And so I think he is really perplexed now what to do.
I guess X the unknown is what Prigozhin wants to do, whether this really is an attempt to change leadership at the top, meaning Putin, or among the military establishment, those that he's been fighting with for weaponry and armaments.
Well, I think it is an effort to change the military establishment. That's clear. He's made that very clear. Shoigu and Gerasimov, and to say that they've done a terrible job prosecuting the war and he would do a better job. But then think about it. If he controls the power in Russia, the military, the Ministry of Defense, and possibly even intelligence services, where does that put Putin? What is Putin's claim to power? So I think it ultimately is an effort to change the leadership in Russia.
This comes, I guess, 16 months into the Russian invasion of Ukraine and amidst Zelensky's counteroffensive. How can the Ukraine best exploit this situation?
Move quickly. That the Russian forces are going to be in a state of uncertainty. The Wagner forces will be gone. The regular forces are probably beginning to feel that this is a failed campaign, and nobody wants to be the last soldier to die in a failed effort. So the motivation on the Russian side is to stop and get out. So the Ukrainians should do both what they have been doing, both things they have been doing, offer the Russian soldiers a way to lay down their arms and surrender, and also urge them to get out. And then at the same time, press forward with the military offensive to show that there's no let up there, that the Ukrainian forces are going to keep moving in.
You began by saying that you expect and hope, I imagine, that this is the beginning of the end. It would seem to me that getting the message to those Russian soldiers still on a battlefield in Ukraine about what now is taking place between the Wagner Group and President Putin is of paramount importance, so as to cause, mental fatigue and a lack of morale among them. How do you do that psychologically?
I'm sure it's already happening. I'm sure the Wagner Group is doing it. They're communicating that to the Russian military. And I'm sure the Ukrainians are doing that. And they have lots of means through Telegram channels to get things out for the Russian military as well. So I think actually that information is getting to them.
And a final question, is this a moment for NATO to, and including, of course, the United States, to push all the chips into the center of the table in terms of that military support that we promised and have not yet delivered?
Yeah, we should have done it before this. There was no reason not to last week or the week before, and we should still do that. Our objective should be to help Ukraine end the war as quickly as possible. The fewer people who die, the better. So that's what we should be trying to do. And then when Ukraine has seen that Russian forces have withdrawn and there's some stable border again, we need to bring Ukraine into NATO quickly, because that is the one thing that Russia seems to respect, that they know that they've never attacked a NATO country, only in the gray zones. And so we have to close those gray zones.
The incrementalism that has marked our support thus far seems to have been guided by a declining fear of what Putin's response might be. My final question, are you concerned that Putin might do something drastic given what he's now facing?
Well, what he's now facing is a fight inside Russia. So, for instance, I think what you're referring to is the possible use of nuclear weapons. Do you think Putin would actually use nuclear weapons against a Russian city or a Russian military garrison? I would be very skeptical. And it's not only his decision, it's the Russian military that has to do that as well. And I can't imagine that there would actually be a use of nuclear weapons against Russia. And that's his real problem now, not Ukraine.